not only have I been able to predict accurately for people in their personal lives, but I've also had world predictions come to pass and come true, that either came through prophetic dreams or through the intention of me wanting to know the future about a world event or a situation.
Hmm.
And the more I've done it, the better and the more refined I get and the more I understand it. So I feel more confident about it today than I did 2 or 3 years ago. But also,
Hmm.
I'm not afraid of making mistakes. I'm not afraid of showing the world that I am a human being and I'm not 100% accurate. I'm not going to interpret everything accurately. I'm not always going to understand the full picture. Sometimes I'm going to make a mistake because I'm a human being, just like
Hmm.
all other professions, just like all specialists in their fields. So I'm okay with making mistakes and owning those mistakes and owning when I've missed the mark or when I've not achieved an accuracy that I was hoping for with predicting events.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Spotlight Houston, where we bring you the best of the people, places, and events in Houston. This week, we're ringing in the new year by bringing you a look at what to expect in 2024. We sat down for a conversation with Fernando Marron, a psychic and medium renowned for his accurate predictions. He gives us his insights on what 2024 will bring. Before we begin, here's a required disclaimer. This podcast episode is for entertainment purposes only. Predictions are speculative, so please don't make any major life decisions based on them. For serious matters, always seek professional advice. We want to share our sincere gratitude with Fernando for graciously sharing his predictions with us. We look forward to seeing which come true. And now your host, Blanca Quesada.
Hi, everybody. Like many of you, I always wonder and am curious about what's going to happen in the new year. And 2024 is here with us now, and I want to know what's going to be happening in the world around us. Of course, who the winners are going to be for the Super Bowl, and but seriously, I always hold on to the hope that whatever changes come, whatever comes in the new year around the world, that it's going to be good and positive and that everybody's going to be happy. So hopefully that's what we can expect. But because of that curiosity, today I've invited my guest, who is an expert that could maybe give us some insight into what we can expect. My guest today is a well known psychic and medium. He is Fernando Marron, and he will be discussing how he acquired his special gifts, which are really very special, and some of his past predictions, but most especially what we can expect for 2024. So, welcome, Fernando.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to educate people on what I do and how this works and how we
Y-
all can tap into it.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me to have you on the show. Um, First of all, I'm curious to know how you knew that you had these special gifts of being a psychic and a medium.
hmm I always refer to them as a develop skill. Oftentimes people will call them a gift, but automatically, whenever people call them a gift, it kind of makes it seem as if only some of us can do this and
Right.
not all of us have it. But I really truly believe we all have this ability. So what I prefer to call it is a developed skill, because I can give someone the gift of a recipe, but unless they put in the work and the effort, it really isn't anything, just a recipe. And so everybody can do what I do. And I don't even like to think of myself as special. The only difference between yourself and myself is that I've spent years understanding the process and developing this ability. But the process of me discovering this and how I figured out uh, that I could do this and that this was a real thing, it started when I was a teenager. And this was in the mid 90s. I think it was like 94, 90, around there, and there was a show on TV called Star Trek Voyager. And on the show, there was a character named Cass who had these abilities to sense the future. She could perceive things, telepathically communicate, move things with her mind. I thought it was incredible. At that time, I was going through a process of figuring myself out. I was recently coming to understand that I was different, and that I was not the average, teenage boy. I was coming to terms with my sexuality, being a gay man, I was still really young and figuring things out. And I didn't feel very welcomed or accepted by my Catholic faith and my upbringing. So I started questioning everything and having these one-on-one conversations with God in my mind, just trying to understand. And so I saw this show, and it just opened up my imagination, and I could see this character, and in the context of that show, the only reason she had these abilities was because her race came from a planet where they all lived underground, and very few of them would come to the surface or come above ground. She made the journey, and she was able to come away from her planet, and as she stepped away from that and all that she knew, these abilities began to develop and evolve. And then she had to learn how to control them and to use them. So in seeing that, it really opened up my idea of like, well, what about us humans? This is the ideas of this character from a planet far, far away, and so what about if we humans had this potential to do things as well, but we didn't realize it because we had forgotten over time, and maybe we were able to do things that we normally wouldn't. So I started asking, the universe, God, what can we do? What is being hidden from us? What have we forgotten in our own abilities? Within the week of asking and and thinking about that, and wondering if there was any possibility for us to have these abilities, I started having my first psychic experiences. And the very first one happened where I had gotten up to go to the kitchen to get a snack. And back then I was a little heavier set. So I used to go to the kitchen on a regular basis looking for a snack as a teenage boy. And as I walked into the doorway of the kitchen, imagined or visualized in my mind, I saw a memory play out, but the memory was of something that had not happened yet. And the memory was of the kitchen cabinets and the stove we had in the kitchen on fire, the kitchen filled with smoke, and me standing there seeing this scene. And so the memory played itself out in my mind, and a voice popped up and came to me, but the voice sounded like me. It didn't sound like a different person. It didn't sound like someone else. It sounded like my voice, except it was calm, it was graceful, and it had a sense of authority. And the voice said, "If this happened, what would you do?" And it was referring to the visual of the fire that I was seeing in my mind. So I thought to myself, I don't know what would I do, and didn't think about the voice at all. Didn't think that was odd because we think things sometimes. So I thought to myself, what I wonder what we would do if this happened. How would I handle the situation? So I came up with a plan of action, and the plan of action was I would take a deep breath. I would go straight to the kitchen sink. I would pull out the water hose, spray down the fire, and then I'd go out that door. And at the time, the house that we lived in, it had burglar bars on all of the windows and doors because it was a bad neighborhood. And so that door was the only one that didn't have bars on it, and it was a way in and a way out, and it was in the kitchen. So I practiced that plan every single day, several times a day for almost 2 weeks. 2 weeks go by, no reason, just my mom's at work. I decide to make myself breakfast. I'm cooking on the stove. And at that time, the stove that we had was a hand me down from an uncle who had bought new appliances, and he no longer needed that stove. But also, it had issues where it was an electric stove. So the knobs, if you turned it on off, it wouldn't always be off. You would have to put your hands kind of over the stove to feel for heat, and then mess with the knob to see if you can get to feeling it turn off. So that's what I did. Felt the heat turn off when I messed with the knob, and I decided to go to the bedroom. And as I walked away, the fire alarm, the smoke detector was blaring. It always blared because it was right above the stove, and someone thought it was a good idea to put it there. So every time we cooked, it would go off. So I left the kitchen, went to my bedroom, and the alarm was still going off. Turned off the stove, moved the pan over to the side, started eating. And the voice that I heard 2 weeks prior popped back into my head. Same style, same authority. Fernando, go to the kitchen. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, no, I want to watch my cartoons. I want to eat my breakfast.
Yeah.
And so the voice came back again and said, Fernando, go to the kitchen. And it was louder and almost sounded like a parent that was scolding their child, like, you need to do this.
Mhm.
And it started to feel like an obsessive thought, almost like whenever you leave home and you're wondering, did I close the door? And you start to obsess about it. So then I thought, no, I don't. And I started having a conversation with this voice. I don't want to get up and go to the kitchen. I want to eat my breakfast. Third time, Fernando, go to the kitchen. Very loud, very distinctively authoritative, just intentionally trying to make sure I understood I needed to get up and go to the kitchen. So at that moment, I gave up and I said, fine, I will go to the kitchen. I will go already. And so I put my food down, got up, walked to the kitchen. As I approached the doorway, there was smoke billowing out of the kitchen and fire kind of the light of the fire was hitting the smoke and I could see
Oh,
it.
wow.
Immediately, I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And so I ran up to the door and stood there. And right before me was the scene I had seen in my mind as a memory 2 weeks prior. And in the moment when you're dealing with something like that, it kind of hits you as a shock. And I was like, what do I do? Like, what do I do? I'm not sure what to do in the moment because I'm trying to process what's happening. And in my mind, I hear, you know what to do. You've been practicing for this. Do it now. And so immediately it all kicked in, and the training that I had given myself for the last 2 weeks came immediately to my awareness, and I did exactly that. And I was able to put out the fire, stop it from burning the house down, and was able to go out the back door and breathe before died of a smoke inhalation. So had I not stopped that fire and had I not been able to go out that door, I probably would have died of being burned alive or smoke inhalation.
Or listen to the voice.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah,
since then, I've been listening and
yeah.
learning how to use this.
So at what point, um, did you gain the confidence to be able to or how is it that you are able to predict what's going to happen in the future?
Confidence comes with experience. I deal with a lot of people who are developing and students who are trying to push themselves, some of them to do this professionally, because this is my full time profession. Confidence comes with time and with experience. And the more you practice the use of your skills by first understanding them, the more you begin to realize you are actually doing this and doing it at will, and you gain control. And with that comes the confidence of doing something over and over and over again. I used to work for Starbucks many years ago. And after many lattes, I could just make a latte and I knew it was going to taste delicious and it was going to be good. And I expected very few complaints on a regular basis. And that's how it was. Same thing with readings. At this point, I do about 2,600 readings a year, private appointments, and that's not including the free live events that I do on the Wednesdays and Fridays on social media, and also the e-readings that I do as well. So I do a lot of readings and I use my ability quite a bit on a regular basis. And that's a lot of practice. So the more you practice, the more you use your ability, the more you see the evidence that supports and that proves you're doing something and I'm sensing things accurately, the more confidence you gain. So I've gained a lot of confidence over time because not only have I been able to predict accurately for people in their personal lives, but I've also had world predictions come to pass and come true, that either came through prophetic dreams or through the intention of me wanting to know the future about a world event or a situation.
Mhm.
And the more I've done it, the better and the more refined I get and the more I understand it. So I feel more confident about it today than I did 2 or 3 years ago. But also,
Mhm.
I'm not afraid of making mistakes. I'm not afraid of showing the world that I am a human being and I'm not 100% accurate. I'm not going to interpret everything accurately. I'm not always going to understand the full picture. Sometimes I'm going to make a mistake because I'm a human being, just like
Mhm.
all other professions, just like all specialists in their fields. So I'm okay with making mistakes and owning those mistakes and owning when I've missed the mark or when I've not achieved accuracy that I was hoping for with predicting events.
So what is it that you predict for 2024? What are you seeing?
There is a lot that will be happening. I mean, every year, everything. I think in this day and age, every year there's just a whole host of extra stuff that we have to deal with. In the next year, I do think there are quite a few things of notable events that I think are going to be taking place. I do expect, and this is something that I predicted in January of 2023, though this year, I predicted this, and we've started to see this showing up now. Initially, when I predicted this, I put it out as a TikTok video and as a video on Instagram. What I predicted is that there would be commercial ships that would begin to be attacked by countries that had beef with the US and its allies. And that some of these ships, commercial ships that were not under the jurisdiction of the US or its government, would be sunken or would be attacked, and it would disrupt the commerce industry and the transportation industry with goods coming from other countries going to other countries as well. So initially, when I made the prediction, I thought this would be in the Pacific Ocean, because I saw a lot of activity and naval ships out in the Pacific Ocean, just going back and forth in convoys, protecting these shipping lanes. I also kept seeing a lot of explosive activity around Hawaii. And at the time, I thought maybe that had to do with ships being attacked around Hawaii. Now I realize what I was seeing was the fires that hit Hawaii, and why I kept seeing smoke and fires at Hawaii, because that's what ended up happening. But my brain was trying to push them together as if it was the
Mhm.
same situation. But I kept seeing that, and I discussed that in detail on social media, and so now we're seeing that happening in the Red Sea with ships, commercial
Right.
ships being attacked. And now there's a lot of kick up activity going on. The US is starting to work with
Do you
allies
see
to create
that
convoys.
continuing? Do you see
I
that
do.
continuing?
So I think it's going to expand, and I think it's going to come into the Pacific as well and start to affect other ships as well in other areas of the world. So I think that's going to continue for another 2 or 3 years before that kind of dies down.
Yeah. What about the advancement of technology and science?
Hmm. I er, a few years back, I put out, and this was in 2020 or 2021, I put out a long list of future advances that would occur with science and other areas. People can find that on medium.com. It's a whole article. But one thing that I had mentioned was that there were going to be, and also through a post on social media, that there would be a new type of fusion energy, atomic fusion energy. There would be a breakthrough, and that there would be a new power source through atomic fusion, and that would begin to be one of the more reliable sources, along with solar, along with wind, and that would start to kind of shift the trajectory of our usage with using natural resources and oil as our main fuel source. So that just got announced a couple of weeks ago, I think, that they made a breakthrough, and
Mhm.
now that the nuclear reactors, they're able to produce more power than they're using. So that's a huge shift in that direction, and that's aligning with what I've been seeing. I also think that we're going to start to see a lot more usage of AI and automated systems in the medical industry and also in commercial business as well. We're already seeing a lot of this with people.
Yeah.
You can check out your own groceries now, but
Yeah.
we still need people to kind of run the show or to kind of help us in the process.
Yeah.
So
AI
I
is not gonna run itself, right?
Exactly, it's not going to run itself until it learns to run itself.
Right.
And so what will happen is, and I've made some of these predictions in a few years past. Now we're starting to see this show up. We're going to start to see a lot of the roles that would normally be taken up by people, especially in retail, with someone who's ringing you out or making your food or is helping you at the register with your groceries. We will now start to see AI systems kind of in place of a person, because people are no longer going to want to do these medial jobs where they're getting paid very little to take on all of this work that isn't really giving them enough to survive off of. So a
Right.
lot of these service based work and roles that we've seen in the restaurant and the retail, we'll start to see AI systems starting to replace that. We'll also see these automated clinics and hospitals that I predicted a few years back as well, where you walk in and immediately the system is designed to diagnose and detect and help you to not only get ahead of some of the issues that it might detect in your system, but also it will help to diagnose and treat, and to come out with a form of therapy for you if you have a specific condition or ailment. And so there are these
Yeah.
automated clinics and hospital systems that will be put into practice, but we may start seeing them used in other countries because they're going to be using and testing these systems in
Mm.
places where they kind of need clinics but don't have the staff or the
Mhm.
enough of a place to be able to do it. So they may set up
Yeah.
these smaller systems to test them out. So we'll start seeing
Yeah.
more of those being put in to
What
practice
about
as
health
well.
issues?
Hmm.
What about health issues? For example, do you happen to foresee, another form of COVID happening? Um, some issues like that, maybe cancer being, eliminated, every
Hmm.
type of cancer being eliminated or anything like
Hmm.
that?
I do see a form of vaccine. I think there's going to be a round or a series of vaccines that start to roll out regarding certain types of cancers, which they're already working on to begin with.
Right.
But part of that is going to have to do with the way that the cells are interacting with each other, which is the basis of how cancer becomes an issue. And what I think will happen is there will be a type of vaccine that comes up where it kind of provides a protective boundary or barrier around specific cells so that if they interact with a type of cell that once the interaction takes place would create a cancer a cancer diagnosis and the spreading of certain cells that would be uh, problems or issues for the body, this barrier, this boundary would start. It's almost like an immunization against cancer, but it's a protective boundary around the cell wall that would keep it from pretty much interacting with cells that would have issues and produce cancer in the body. So I do think we'll start to see some of that. I believe we are on the way to curing cancer over a 5 year period. So I
Oh,
think over
wow.
the next 5 or 6 years, I don't really see cancer being as much of an issue as it is now. I think there will still be forms of cancer that kind of fall into different categories, but I don't think the level of cancer that we see today, where it's like everybody and we all know someone who's died of cancer,
Yeah.
it will no longer be the issue. I think we're also going to see COVID is going to continue to be. It's going to be around. It's going to continue to be around. I do think there may be two more periods of heavy COVID where people are still having a lot of issues and dying in larger numbers because of complications from it. But ultimately, COVID is going to help to create a breakthrough in understanding different types of viral infections and how they affect the body, because it's going to give our scientists and AI systems that study it a lot of information and feedback, and it's going to provide other important information to help cure other types of diseases. So I think HIV, AIDS will also be gone within the next 5 or 6 years as well. I also think that types of um, um, issues that affect blood sugar, like diabetes, I actually think diabetes is a little bit different in the way that it affects the body than what is understood, and it will be treated or handled like a disease, like a virus. So there will be a form of treatment plan for people who are diagnosed with with diabetes and how that's affecting the system as well. So I do
Oh,
think there's a lot of breakthroughs that are coming up, and it's actually because of AI and the integration of AI into medical systems that will help to produce these breakthroughs.
yeah. What about our environment?
That is going to be an ongoing challenge for us. I think that we have to clean up our own mess. And I think
Mhm.
that trying to help the environment recover and help to get the environment to a place of stability is going to be a 20-year process. So I think that over the next 20 years, we're going to continue to see a slide towards instability. We may also start to see, because the weather is changing drastically and it is continuing to be volatile, it'll be harder to travel through with airplanes because of um, the instability of the ecosystem and the environmental the atmosphere. It'll become
Yeah,
more
the warming
unstable.
issue, right?
Yeah, it's not just warming, it's also the instability as to how the different layers of the outer areas
Atmosphere?
of the atmosphere are interacting with each other, which will become more unstable. So we're not going to have a choice but to focus on fixing things, because we've let things go too far and now we're going to see the results and the payback
Mhm.
the mother nature is going to have on us. So we're
Yeah,
not going to have a choice. We're going to have to put
yeah,
funding towards helping
yeah,
the environment recover.
yeah. What about politically for
Politically,
the city
so
of Houston and, of course, the,
mhm.
upcoming elections for president?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. I had a call earlier with a client who, interestingly enough, works for HISD, and they're seeing right now the state government has kind of taken over the HISD and some of these school systems and districts because they're trying to force changes and trying to force a political perspective on schools and on what is being taught in schools. Um, what I think is going to happen is I think that some of these, the city of Houston, HISD, they're going to basically be suing the state, and this is going to become a bigger issue because they've overstepped their bounds and they are essentially trying to reduce and remove the education system as it exists and turn it into something completely different so that they can kind of pull back on the funding. So I think that we're going to see a lot of this infighting with educational systems and so forth, to where there will be a new law at some point enacted that protects school systems from being overridden and controlled by a government system so it can act and operate autonomously and independently of government in a way where it's got its own protections in place. I do think that, interestingly enough, China is going to pull back on supporting Russia towards the end of 2024, which might shift the support that Russia has with the war in Ukraine. And I made this prediction years ago that there would be this whole event. The banks would turn on, the banks were going to start to fail in Russia, that Putin would be ousted by the rich and the people in government because he was going to be making bad decisions for the country. So I think that towards the end of 2024, we'll start to see some of that support really die down a lot to where he's going to be out of office within the next two years, I believe. So I think he'll be out. And then we'll start to see the Ukraine kind of restructuring itself and working to become not only a part of NATO and be an ally, but also kind of be its own country, and it's going through its own revival period as well. We may also see technology being used in policing vehicles that are going to be put on the streets. So there will be vehicles that are completely automated using AI. They will still be connected to a centralized location where you have a lot of people who are tech and who are basically officers, but they're officers from the perspective of they know the law and they reinforce it using technology, but aren't actually out there arresting or so. Where there's a new wave of officers that will be brought into the picture, but we'll also see these automated units, policing vehicles going about doing
Mhm.
tickets. So you won't be ticketed by a person anymore. You'll be ticketed by an automated unit and a vehicle. So it'll be interesting to see that coming up, and that'll be worked out with a new company that comes up in the ashes of Tesla, because I feel like Tesla's going to go through its own drama, and they may try to work on some of these systems and even try to get into a contract with the government. But ultimately, there will be a new company that comes out of those ashes and will end up being the company that ends up getting all of these deals and putting all these vehicles on the street. So I definitely don't see Trump being reelected. I think he'll be made ineligible to run, and he won't be able to run. I also think there will be another attempted attack, not to the same level that we had in the last one with the Capitol. I made a prediction in March or April of 2020 two that that was going to happen. Actually, 2021. I made a prediction in 2020 or 2021, almost a year before the attack on the Capitol, and I had a prophetic dream about it. And then I made a prediction that there would be an attack on the Capitol building during the election or around the time of the election, and that there would be an attempted coup and all of this. And I even had visuals of Trump and what he was going to be doing. That all played out and happened. So with this upcoming
Any
election, go ahead.
yeah. No, I was gonna ask, are there any fun things that are coming up for 2024?
Besides, I definitely don't see him being elected again. Biden, and I think this is where it's going to be interesting. I think Biden will get reelected uh, because I had a dream where I saw him, everybody was celebrating him, and I saw him having a health issue, possibly with his heart, that would take him out of the presidency, would automatically bring the vice president and make her president. And then she would end up also picking a female as the vice president. So it would be the first female and female duo for leadership in the country.
Interesting,
hmm
interesting, interesting.
so that'll be interesting to see what happens. First female president. So that's a big deal. Whether you agree with her politics and like her or not, it's still a big deal. It's an important milestone for our country. Um,
Right.
so I thought that would be a good thing to happen in the next year.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that you've got a long list of incredible things that are going to be
Yeah.
happening for 2024.
Yeah.
So, where can our listeners find that information?
Yeah. So, if anyone is interested in my list of predictions or even just keeping up, because I'm always putting out new predictions and I try to keep a tally of my predictions on my website and I show you the ones that I got correct and the ones that I missed. So you get to see
Mhm,
when I hit, when I missed it. Just go to my website, fernandomarron.com, FERNANDOMARRON.com. And everything you need to know about me is on there. The links to my classes as well, which now I am teaching people on a regular basis, and it's incredible to see people go from thinking that they have zero ability to suddenly having immediate validation that they are psychic through the exercises and the program that I have them go through, which you can find on my website as well.
yeah, and you have spiritual readings as well?
Yeah. So not only am I a psychic, I'm also a medium, and I offer the opportunity for people to connect with their loved ones in spirit as well. And they can also tune in on Wednesdays and Fridays on TikTok and on Instagram, where I offer free sessions for people who can't afford it, or people who just want to see how this works and what this looks like from a
Yeah.
realistic perspective. Because TV has kind of made us think that this works in a way that it really doesn't.
Yeah, and in your website, you also talk about guides and what it's like to be you,
Mhm.
because I'm sure that maybe some people are afraid to talk to somebody that has these gifts of being a psychic or a medium, and so you talk about yourself and guides and a whole lot of other things that are quite interesting to me. So I'm sure they might be interesting to our listeners as well.
Yeah, and I will be having a book coming out also.
Yes,
Hopefully,
yes.
in the next year. So we talk about my story and how I developed my abilities and evolved this, and how I understand this to be. And that's just the part of the book. The rest of the book is teaching people how this works, how to use this ability. Because I don't believe you need to talk to angels or have a relationship with your spirit guide. They talk about those things, but it's not necessary. All of this is brain power and using the power that you possess within your mind.
Yeah, because we don't know. We kind of limit our mental powers because we don't know how strong they can be,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And people will be shocked and surprised at how easy it is to use these abilities.
Yeah. Well, Fernando, it was great having you here. Looking forward to actually seeing all these predictions that you've made and all the ones that you have on your website. Um, so this has been a lot of fun, and I thank you so much again for being with me. And of course, I'd like to thank everyone for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed the show. And on behalf of myself and Sandra Fernandez, the show's producer, we wish you an amazing new year. And please continue to send us your comments or any story ideas that you might have.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated the opportunity to connect.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Spotlight Houston, a production of Story Zone Media.